The nickel. Since 1938, the front has borne an image of Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States. The reverse usually shows a picture of his home, Monticello, although there were special editions minted in 2004 and 2005 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition. In a world where we barely use change anymore at all, nickels don't seem to gain a lot of attention, but that wasn't always the case. In 1883, a new nickel design was minted that gave the United States Mint great consternation and led to fraud all over the country. And one of the most famous fraudsters of the 1883 Racketeer Nickel was said to be both deaf and mute, which essentially helped him to perpetrate his fraud. It is history that deserves to be remembered. Counterfeiting is nearly as old as coinage. Around 600 BC, ancient Lydians minted coins out of electrum, a naturally occurring gold and silver alloy believed to be among the oldest coins ever minted. Greek historian Herodotus credits them as the first people to use gold and silver coins, although historically that is a matter of debate. Even these ancient coins seem to have been counterfeited, as versions with base metal cores plated with electrum, gold, or silver have been found. In the early modern period, coins were often clipped or shaved for the precious metal, which was always of value. Coins were given reeded edges specifically to prevent people from passing off shaved coins. The first American coins with reeded edges were struck in the 1790s on half dimes. They weren't yet known as a nickel, as well as on larger coins. But a good counterfeiter or fraudster was always on the lookout for an opportunity. From the 1790s, American coins were minted in a variety of denominations, including the half-cent, 2-cent, and 3-cent pieces, up to the gold $2.50 quarter eagle, the $5 half eagle, and the $10 eagle coins. Most of these coins were made of varying amounts of precious metal, usually gold or silver, with lower denominations made of copper. Half dimes, valued at 5 cents, were originally silver, which changed in the 1860s thanks to lobbying efforts by Joseph Wharton, who had a near monopoly on nickel production in the United States. He successfully lobbied for the 3-cent piece and the 5-cent piece to be made with copper nickel, leading to the James Longacre designed shield nickels. Shield nickels were only legal tender up to $1 initially, and that, combined with a widely criticized design, led to numerous suggestions for change. The American Journal of Numismatics even described the shield nickel as the ugliest of all known coins. The shield nickel is also what would eventually lead to the term nickel to describe a 5-cent piece. It's not actually the first coin to include nickel. In 1857, the mint had shifted penny production to an alloy of 88% copper and 12% nickel. These nickel pennies were the first coins to be called nickels in the United States, differentiating them from the most coinage made of gold or silver. Besides Wharton's lobbying, there were other good reasons by 1866 to make coins out of base metals. During the Civil War, commerce slowed dramatically, in large part because Americans began hoarding gold and silver coins, which would hold value regardless of inflation. This caused both the Union and the Confederacy to issue paper money in cent denominations. Some banks even printed their own paper money so that commerce could continue. The issue of scarcity and hoarding continued after the Civil War. The mint simply could not keep up with demand for coinage. Thus, in 1866, the mint began producing 3- and 5-cent pieces made of 25% nickel and 75% copper. However, the nickel was not the only 5-cent piece to be minted during this time. Silver half dimes continued to be minted until 1873. Both the 5-cent piece and the 3-cent piece could be called nickels after that, as they were the only coins made from the material. In the years immediately after the Civil War, these coins were minted in huge numbers, nearly 15 million in 1866 and over 30 million in 1867. So many of the coins were minted that by the late 1870s, the glut of coinage forced the mint to cease minting 5-cent nickels completely. None were minted for circulation in 1877 or 1878, and fewer than 70,000 were minted in 1879, 80, and 81. Wharton, seeking to sell more of his nickel to the government, began lobbying for more coins to be made out of nickel. Wharton hoped to convince the mint to shift pennies to copper nickel as they were being minted in much larger numbers. By 1881, his consistent lobbying led Mint Superintendent Archibald Loudon Snowden to order new designs for the 1, 3, and 5-cent pieces from the mint's engraver, Charles Barber. Barber was given very specific instructions on his designs. The obverse, the head side, was to have a classic Liberty head, while the reverse was to feature a wreath around a Roman numeral denoting the value V for the 5-cent piece. The nickel was also to be slightly larger than the shield nickel. The smaller denomination coins were meant to be identical except for size and the Roman numerals on the reverse, but early in the design process, development of the penny and the 3-cent piece were abandoned, and only a new nickel design was produced. A large number of pattern coins, coins that were not released but used to evaluate the design, which was modified slightly before being approved and sent to the Treasury Secretary. The initial design was actually rejected as the words United States of America appeared on the head side of the coin, and coinage statutes actually required it to be on the reverse. While other issues had been considered, one thing the coin did not have when it was approved was the word cents. The mint could be excused for a mitigant. Early silver and copper nickel designs in 3-cent pieces didn't say cents and had circulated for years without complaint. The coin was meant to start minting in 1883, but the dies for striking the coins weren't ready in time, and so throughout January the Philadelphia Mint struck nearly 1.5 million 1883 shield nickels. The new design was finally released in February, and almost immediately others noticed that the coins were problematic. On February 11th, the New York Times published a press release from Washington, D.C. that stated, Chief Brooks of the Secret Service says that he regards the new nickels as very dangerous coins. A thin plating would enable persons to pass them off as gold coins of a new issue. The problem arose from the new nickel's similarity to the $5 gold half-eagle coin. Both bore a Liberty head design on the front and were nearly the same size, 21.21 millimeters for the nickel and 21.6 millimeters for the half-eagle. The reverse of the half-eagle was an eagle behind a shield, but a gold-plated nickel was nearly the same weight and size, and if only glanced at, could easily be passed off at 100 times its value. And there were enough clever people to take advantage. The most famous story of fraud using gold-plated nickels is that of Josh Tatum, a deaf-mute purportedly from Boston. Depending on the source, Tatum was said to have collected a good number of the new nickels before enlisting someone, usually a pawn shop owner who may have been an amateur jeweler, to plate the change. The Palladium Item newspaper of Richmond, Indiana relates that, carrying the 1,000 plated nickels in a small black bag and looking respectable with a mustache and balding head, he would enter a tobacco store, place the coin on the counter, and point to a 5-cent cigar. The clerk would grab the cigar and hand it and $4.95 in change back. Tatum would then move on to the next store. He eventually had more plated, making his way from Boston to New York and hitting every shop that sold a cigar. By some claims, he was able to make $15,000 on the scheme before someone caught up to him, and he was arrested. But there was an issue. When he was taken to court by the store owners he had cheated, they couldn't convict him. When each witness who had been cheated out of $4.95 was asked if Tatum had ever asked for change, each witness had to say no. The man was mute. By asking for only a 5-cent cigar, Tatum could claim that he never misrepresented the coin. It was the seller's mistake giving him change. A coin collector explained to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, the shop owners were simply out of luck thanks to carelessness. It's been claimed that this act is the source of the phrase, just joshing you, to mean usually a harmless joke or prank. The first certain report of gold-plated Liberty nickels appeared only 12 days after the coins were first issued. The new 5-cent coins are so perfectly gold-washed as to deceive any ignorant persons and pass readily among them for new $5 gold pieces, reported another press release. The Baltimore Sun reported on the February 19th that a gold-plated 5-cent piece of the new issue has reached the Sun office, and its resemblance to a $5 gold piece is quite enough to deceive. 4 days later, the Charlotte Observer in North Carolina reported that the merchants who had seen the nickel give the authorities credit for their wisdom in stopping the coinage of the dangerous piece. But others were less understanding. The Intelligencer Journal of Lancaster, Pennsylvania printed, "Someone about the Philadelphia Mint has a mania for putting new faces on coins, and unfortunately, good judgment and good taste seldom attend the performance." Only 2 weeks after their introduction, there was already talk at the Mint and the Treasury Department about withdrawing the new coins from circulation. Treasury Secretary Charles Folger seems to have believed that unnecessary, but reports continued to proliferate that the coin was being used for fraud. Secret Service agent Henry Finnegas arrested a man for trying to pass off a gold nickel across the country in San Francisco. Finnegas also reported that several persons engaged in the gold and silver plating business in this city have called upon me to ascertain if they could gild the new 5-cent nickel without my interfering with them. Archibald Loudon Snowden, chief executive of the Mint, fought the changes well, arguing that no one had plated the 3-cent piece and passed it off for the quarter eagle. But it hardly mattered. By March, the decision had been made to alter the design to include cents on the reverse. Though the York Dispatch of York, Pennsylvania reported that minting of the no-cents nickel continued, with nearly $5,000 being minted in Philadelphia every day. Papers across the country reported, however, that the no-cents coins would be collected by the Mint to be destroyed. The new design finally began minting on June 26, but only after 5,479,519 no-cents coins had been minted. Because of the reports that the coin would be recalled, many of those 5 million were hoarded by collectors who believed the coin would be valuable. Ironically, because so many of them were saved, high-quality no-cents nickels are relatively common, while high-quality cent nickels are considerably more rare. It might disappoint you to find out that the famous story of Josh Tatum is likely nothing more than legend. The coin was certainly plated, and likely used in schemes similar to the one attributed to Tatum, but he doesn't appear as any of the men arrested across the country for the scheme. More importantly, his story doesn't appear in any contemporary newspaper account. The story seems to have proliferated in 1965, when it appeared in multiple papers on articles about coin shows. But possibly the earliest version appears in the Southwest Times of Pulaski, Virginia on December 14th, 1958, told by a Miss Willie Long. It isn't clear where she heard the story. Even more disappointing, the story is definitely not the origin of the phrase, just joshing you. In fact, the phrase's origin is uncertain, but Merriam-Webster dates its origin to at least 1845, well before Tatum's supposed exploits. The phrase has also been suggested to come from humorist Josh Billings, the pen name of Henry Wheeler Shaw, whose career began in 1858. The origin of the phrase is, unfortunately, simply unknown. While the story of Josh Tatum might be purely legend, the fraud surrounding the controversial no-cents nickel was very real, and since then the nickel has come to be commonly called the Racketeer Nickel. Liberty nickels were produced clear until 1912, and they were replaced officially by the Buffalo nickel, but no Buffalo nickels were actually minted that year, and there are 1913 examples of the Liberty head nickel. Nickels became more popular in the 20th century, partly because of the proliferation of movie machines that were coin-operated and asked for 5 cents, called, of course, a Nickelodeon. And while today methods of preventing fraud and counterfeiting are much more sophisticated than they once were, the 1883 Racketeer Nickel is still a cautionary tale. Fraudsters will take their chances wherever they can. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the History Guide, short snippets of forgotten history. And if you did enjoy, feed the algorithm by making a comment or clicking that like button. If you have suggestions for future episodes, please send those to our suggestions email box. Check out our webpage at thehistoryguide.net. And of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can book a special message from the History Guy on Cameo and check out our merchandise at teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes of Forgotten History, all you need to do is subscribe.